Now today, this is Dr. Halimah. I'm sure now you recognize me, and today's lecture is lecture number 14, and it is the last lecture of the course. And the title of this lecture is just a brief review of creative translation, 13 lectures. So today we will go through all these 13 lectures very quickly, very briefly, just as a kind of reminder, really, nothing more. This is the main purpose of it, is to review these 13 lectures with you and enable you to have some general idea about the 13 lectures in one lecture. In other words, if you want to print these slides out, and then you would say, okay, these are the summary. This is the summary of all the course. You will have it on a folder, and that's it. You can revise it for the exam, inshallah. The course schedule, as you can see, these are the title of the course. These are the title of the lectures we have been working on throughout the course. We have 13 lectures. Lecture 1, we talked about creative translation, the concept of creative translation, the meaning of creative translation, and then we moved to the problems and pitfalls in creative translation, and we talked about them as well. And we tackled some methods and approaches to creative translation. And then lecture number 4, we talked about what is literary translation. Lecture 5, translation of sacred text, and we took the Quran as an example. Lecture number 6, translation of sacred text, and we took hadith of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ as another example of sacred text. Lecture 7, about orations, how to translate orations. 8, how to translate poetry. 9, how to translate short stories. And 10, the translation of drama. Then lecture 11, 12, and 13, they were, a mixture of all types of literary texts. We included in them examples from poetry, from short stories, from oration, oratorical speeches, and from Arabic and English, to give you the opportunity to see how, to practice translating creative writings, and see how we have translated this type of translation, this type of literary text. If we want to go through each lecture, if you want to know what is this lecture about, this is lecture 1. What is creative translation? We have talked about the meaning of creativity, some general definitions, then creative translation in theory, then a creative translation in practice. Then at the end of each lecture, I have given you a practical A from English into Arabic, and a practical B from Arabic into English. What I mean, I've given you exercises to do at home so that you become a good translator. Lecture 2, again, we talked about the types of problems and pitfalls in creative translations, and this would involve semantic shifts over time, poetic license or liberties. Then we talked about compound multiple meanings, rhyme and verse, cultural illusions, technical terms, and problems with concepts that lack counterpart in the target language. So, and then as usual at the end I've given you practical A and practical B. Regarding the methods, we have tackled 2 or 3 major methods and approaches to translating creative texts, and mainly the 2-stage approach to creative translation, and then some other approaches which they range from holistic approach to creative translation to approaches mentioned by André Lefebvre, Advances 7 Strategies and the Blueprint, and Octave Paz look at translation as both bilingual and bicultural activity. And then practicals as usual, A and B. Lecture number 4 was about introducing literary text. What do we mean by literary translation? Literary translation involves or covers certain types of text, translation types of text like poetry, drama, short story, oration, sacred text, and so on and so forth. And then we tackle translation as a text. When you want to translate, you need to look at the issue of equivalence, the issue of communicative purpose, and the issue of style. Translation as a process, and the links with social context. Practicals A and B, and number 5, the translation of sacred text. We have talked about how to translate, or whether the translation of the Quran is possible or not possible, and we looked at it from the linguistic point of view, and then from the cultural point of view, and from the psychological point of view, and then from the rhythmic point of view. And we've made general recommendations for those who are interested in the translation of the Quran. And then lecture number 6, we talked about another type of sacred text translation, which was the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We introduced al-Hadith as a central text, and then we discussed and we investigated certain translations of certain hadith, and we focused on the linguistic and the cultural aspects and the rhetorical aspects in the hadith translation. And then of course the practical A and practical B. Translation of orations, lecture number 7. As usual, you need to really always introduce the concept, to define the concept. So we normally define the concept, and then we move on to translation of this concept. We talked about the oratory and what we mean by oratory or oration, then the translation of oration, and then we gave examples of general orations, religious orations, non-prophetic type, and religious oration prophetic type, and then practical A and B. Regarding lecture number 8, translation of poetry, we introduced the translation of poetry, that some people argue, okay, poetry cannot be translated. If you want to translate poetry, you need to be a poet. You need to translate it into poetry. Some people say, no, you shouldn't. You could translate it in prose. But, everybody is entitled for his or her own view. But my own view, if you are really a good translator, then you need to translate poetry into poetry. If this is my personal view. If you are not a good if you are not a good translator, then you move a level lower and translate poetry into prose. There is no harm. We talked about the nature of the translation of poetry, and then how to translate poetry, theory and process. Then we have given you exercises, practical A and practical B. Now, regarding short story translation, you need to understand what we mean by a short story. You need to understand how to translate a short story, and you need to understand how, you know, that stories have different types of stories. And we tackled some examples of religious stories. And again, we gave you exercise at the end of the lecture, practical A and practical B. Lecture number 10, translation of drama. Of course, we introduced the concept of drama, what we mean by drama, and then we talked about how to translate a play or a song or so on, and then we took Shakespeare as a central text, because you know Shakespeare is one of the greatest playwrights in the English-speaking world. And then we gave you examples to practice, practical A and practical B. Then practical lecture 11, look, lecture 12 and lecture 13. All these lectures, these are 3 lectures, we have allocated them to really mainly practicals, and we covered all types of literary text translation. Now, if you want to know what kind of translation questions you might face in the exam, the following 2 are an example. I mean, the examples or the exam questions will be really practical and theoretical, and both will be based on the slides and the handouts. You know, the handouts. So you print out the slides and you print out the handouts, or it's up to you, to be honest. I mean, if you print out the handouts should cover everything, you know, but you need to really understand the slides and listen how I have how I have translated, how I explained to you how we discuss things together. So you need to refer to the slides and the handouts. Example, for instance, question number 1. You say, okay, please choose one answer and circle the appropriate letter. Just an example. Translation is considered as being creative when it is. Translation is considered as being creative when it is novel and appropriate, new and relevant, fresh and imaginative, modern and productive. Which one? If you study the slides and the handouts, believe me, you will know. You should know, because the answer is there. I have taken it from there. All right? So I'm not going to say which one, because you never know. Question number 2, for instance, the most appropriate translation of أكثر من ذكر الله. Remember your God and mention Him as much as you can. Make a lot of mention of God. Make dhikr of Allah whenever possible. Make praising exercises of God. Which one is the most appropriate translation? Now, we are talking about creative translation. We are not talking about literal translation. You know, you can't say, oh, it's the same meaning, doctor. No, I want creative translation. And you know what we mean by creative translation. All right? So these are examples for the exam. Exactly the same. 70 questions. Look. Sorry. Now here, the final allocation of points will be according to the following scale. Participation, attendance, homework, and final exam, 70 marks. All right? And then that's it. If you want to inquire about anything, you can phone me on the office hours. I have put them in the lecture. Office hours, Sundays and Mondays. On Sunday and Monday from 5 till 7:30. Every Sunday, every Monday from 5 till 7:30 I will be sitting the mobile next to me. Without that, I mean, I will not answer it, but only between 5 and 7:30, Sunday and Monday. Okay? And thank you very much indeed. And I wish and I do hope and I pray to God that all of you pass this course, and all of you will learn from this course. And I wish you all the best. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Thank you.